Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our September call. This is the first of our fiscal year. I'm Michael Panzaroli, and this is the OCP. And if you went to Ignite, you know that that stands for One Commercial Partner, not Ignite, Inspire. Yeah, so with just a little bit of rebranding and first call of the fiscal year, and we're still kind of working out our community motion for our new fiscal year and figuring out the types of content that we want to present. But for now, just a little bit of rebranding of our call, so we're kind of aligning under the modern workplace. And this is the Collaboration and Voice U.S. Partner Call. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the United States. And today we have a very important topic, GDPR. And so you're going to find out what that acronym means and for a U.S. partner, why you should care. And of course, we'll always have our community welcome. And then we're going to have some time for Q&A after. And we have one of our security architects with us. We have David Burr, and I'm really excited that he's taken the time to share with us about the partner story for GDPR. So really glad to have him with us today, and I'll be introducing him in just a minute. But first, just a note about our community. And we have these monthly calls every month, and you can sign up for the series. Right now, there isn't a sign up for the whole year, but I will be adding those very soon. And there's a couple of vanity URLs that I want you to care about, the aka.ms. And the one I'd like you to do, if you're not already connected to our community, is to join our Yammer group. So that's the center one right there, aka.ms, join 0365 Yammer, and that is a group of U.S. Partners, and I haven't checked in a little bit, but it grows every week, and I think there's probably close to 2,500 partners on there, and there's a lot of great partner-to-partner sharing of information, and also you'll hear from folks from Microsoft as well. So I encourage you to join that. I'm going to be posting the slides from this deck on that Yammer group after the call. And we also have some blogs that we talk about as well. We kind of talk about the monthly themes. So right now, GDPR, that kind of introduces the topic. So I encourage you to pay attention to those. And again, you can, if you can't remember those vanity URLs, go ahead and download this deck after. And there's a second one, which is called our enablement blog. And that's that second URL there. And so one of my colleagues, David Branscombe, he has another post on GDPR, and it's an opportunity to go a little bit deeper on that topic and also other miscellaneous things that kind of come up that we want to be able to share. So I encourage you to check those blogs out. And then we usually promote different types of opportunities for partners and other training opportunities. Now, I want to apologize for this because this is really quite a list here, and it's really more of a direction. Normally we have some specific things that we want to promote, but this slide will just kind of give you an idea of the types of things that we will be talking about over the entire fiscal year. There's a few immediate things, but just some general directions, and know that we're going to have some training coming up on exams. We're working with different training providers to provide, deeply discounted training so you can pass your cloud productivity exams and help you earn your silver or gold competency. We have some partner practice enablement boot camps that will be coming, kind of focusing on the security compliance, modern desktop, EMS, and all those things will kind of be announced coming soon. But there is one particular thing that I want to mention for any of you that are out there on the East Coast and close to the New York metropolitan area. We've got some training coming up from September 12th to the 14th, so right around the corner in Islip, New Jersey, where we're going to be it's a 3-day session where you can help build a Microsoft 365 security and compliance business. So we did some of this training, something similar in New York several months back, maybe 6 months ago now. And so we're going to be kind of doing that again. And we're going to have other dates. I don't have any other dates right now, but we're planning on doing this throughout the country. And so if that's an area that interests you, I encourage you to stay tuned to our Yammer group. And if we don't have a post up there, I'm going to post it right after this call so you can get that URL. But you can always follow a great Twitter handle to follow is at MS Learning Curve. And that's all US partner training. And so it's a great follow on Twitter if you'd like. That's at MS Learning Curve. All right, so moving right along to our topic, I want to introduce David. David, how are you? And thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Michael. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your commitment to our partner community. I know this is a pretty important topic, and it's something that's was out there for a bit, but actually coming right around the corner, isn't it now?
Yep, that's right. The European Union has, had a number of privacy regulations that have been in effect for quite some time. Well over 10 years. However, the general data protection regulation is a bit different. It's an upgrade to the existing privacy laws, and this has been in place for almost 2 years now, but they're going to begin enforcement on May 25th. And the fines for non-compliance can be very, very high, can be easily hundreds of millions of euros for certain customers. So we think it's very important. We definitely think it's important for anyone that does business in the EU, or certainly has an office in the EU, has to pay attention to this. But really, anyone who has a single customer in a EU country really has to comply.
Right, no matter where they are, too, right? And so, very broad-reaching. So, I know this is an important topic, so I'll go ahead and turn this over to you and let you take over the presentation, and I'll go ahead and be monitoring the Q&A window. So if you have some questions, go ahead and type those in, and I'll be monitoring that. And if you don't get your question answered right away, I will be presenting those back to David a little bit later, and we will knock those down for you.
Okay. All right. Very good. Looks like I just reset your deck when I took over sharing there. All right. Well, let's jump into it. I will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this, and I encourage everyone on the call to ask me questions. I'd love to talk about the GDPR, especially if you're not seeing something you'd like to hear about in this deck. While I'm going through the deck, just you go ahead and paste your questions in, and Michael will interrupt me if anything seems timely or urgent. All right, and briefly, we're just going to talk about what the GDPR is, what Microsoft has to offer in this space, and some next steps for partners. So, and here's a quote from Brad Smith, and we have one from Satya as well. And what I want to emphasize here is that the GDPR has the attention from our top executives. We take it very, very seriously, and we think that Microsoft's longstanding commitment to privacy is help our customers, help our partners. We see that we see consumer privacy as a key differentiator in this space. The fact that we don't harvest information from customer email accounts to market to them and then or sell it to advertisers is it's a pretty big deal, and it's squarely in line with the intent and spirit of the GDPR. And Satya's commitment is huge. So there's two key terms of the GDPR with regard to companies. One is the data controller, and this really applies to people who are in control of customer data. So if a company is collecting information about their customers, they are the data controller, and they make the decisions on how that information is collected, how it's stored, and how it's processed. There's also the kind of key term is data processor. So in this case, when Microsoft offers services to customers, for example, if we're selling them Exchange mailboxes online, we are the data processor. So the customer is responsible for issuing the mailboxes. They're responsible for the content in those mailboxes. They're responsible for complying, with some aspects of the GDPR. And these two terms are going to be important to all of your customers because most folks will fall in both categories depending on what we're, depending on the data in question. So we are committed to 100% GDPR compliance as a controller, and we're committed to taking those lessons learned and helping our customers. And we're also, so the service will be GDPR compliant May 25th, 2018. And on our journey to bringing our, all of Microsoft compliant, we're committed to helping the partners and offering, as much as we can to the partner community to help customers become compliant as well. So a little bit on the GDPR in general. For the GDPR is mostly about privacy rights. So, and it applies to all organizations that are offering goods and services to folks in the EU, right? Collecting and any data with regard to collection and data tied to EU residents, no matter where they're located. So the GDPR is broadly applicable to US-based companies. I think almost all of the customers I've worked with in my consulting days did business to some extent in the EU. So, and it does, the kind of the key tenets here: enhanced personal privacy rights, increased duty for protecting data, mandatory breach reporting, and significant penalties for non-compliance. So we really feel like the Microsoft platform is key to enabling some of these. It's no longer acceptable for an organization to suffer a data breach and allow information about their employees or customers to leak out. So there's kind of 4 categories of key changes. The first is personal privacy. So this is significant in that individuals have the right to access their personal data, all of it. A data subject has the right now to issue a request to any organization and request all of the data that organization has on them. And that data could extend to emails about them. It could extend to customer databases, et cetera. Organizations are responsible for providing a method or a way for the consumers to correct errors in their personal data, as well as they have an obligation to erase personal data that is held for purposes that aren't required. So I get a lot of questions on this one. It does not, we do not believe it means that somebody can ask that financial records be erased about them, for example, but they certainly can request that non-essential business data or data that is not required to be kept for any other lawful purpose could be erased. And our companies, or our customers, now have an obligation to support this process. Individuals have the right to object to the processing of their personal data, as well as the right to request an export of everything that an organization would hold on them. So this is fairly new. A lot of folks are going to have a significant amount of work to do to change their business processes and adopt technology that will support the personal privacy rights as stated under the GDPR. And for folks that haven't started yet, they have a lot of work to do. Because I think for most organizations, these are not simple things to comply with. In addition to personal privacy, there's quite a bit of regulation now on controls and notification. So there's a mandate to protect personal data using appropriate security. What appropriate security is up to the organization to define in some regard. It could be encryption or pseudo-anonymization of data, things like that. If there's a data breach, they have a legal obligation to report the breach to a supervisory authority as well as the folks impacted under a pretty short time frame. And in certain cases, actually, companies will have to obtain consent for processing of certain special types of data. And in addition to all this, they now have an obligation to keep detailed records of their data processing. So this will require some transparent policies. Another big change is that are required to receive clear notice of data collection in terms they can understand. The notice has to be specific. So general privacy notices will probably no longer apply. And the policy, the organizations have to provide They have to tell the data subject exactly what they intend to use their data for and how they're going to use it. And if they change the way they're going to use data, they actually have to obtain consent again. So we definitely expect a significant uptake in personnel and employee training. We definitely see there's certainly going to be a new emphasis on auditing and updating data policies. All organizations are going to have to employ a data protection officer. And this is another new requirement, and this is one of the areas where we see some opportunity for partners to provide this as a service. So there's 5 GDPR rules that we believe require partners' attention right now. One that we want to make it very clear, this is a global mandate. So it doesn't just affect firms that are headquartered in the EU. It affects firms that do business in the EU, have customers there, offices, etc. Data breach notification, we think is a big deal. If someone suffers a data breach, they have a 72-hour window from which to report it to a supervisor authority. The spirit intent of the GDPR is privacy by design. So we see that most customers are going to have to reevaluate some or all of their business processes and the software and technology that they use. So what the GDPR is, the design of the GDPR expects that privacy be baked into all aspects of business and handling personal data for EU data subjects. And we expect about 75,000 DPOs will be required by 2018. And that's a big deal. I mean, that right there, I just don't think there's enough people to fill this role. And the obligations of the DPO are significant. So I don't, I think many folks will need to pay a little bit of attention to this and not simply designate someone as a DPO that doesn't intend to take on the liability and the responsibility of that role. And I think this is a great opportunity for partners because some of our partners already are ramping up to provide DPO as a service, where they have someone that understands the GDPR, has the right type of background, and can help customers meet this obligation without necessarily hiring somebody to do it. And then another kind of key thing is that organizations are going to have to provide evidence of risk mitigation. And it's our position that for organizations that take steps to prepare for the GDPR are in a much more defensible position than the ones that don't. So not only is it required per the letter of the GDPR, it's good business practices. And we also feel that the adoption of our cloud services is a big step forward as far as risk mitigation, because we have quite a bit that we can bring to bear for data security that customers often have a hard time doing themselves. When we talk about what this means for customer privacy, there's stricter control on where personal data is stored and how it is used. We have better data governance, tools for better transparency, record keeping, and reporting, and improved data policies to provide control to data subjects and ensure lawful processing. And a big chunk of the GDPR does revolve around obtaining a legal basis by which to collect and process data. So all organizations subject to the GDPR are going to have to do this. So why Microsoft? We are the first major cloud services provider to pledge GDPR compliance. Number 2 is probably the most significant to me, is that we are an industry leader on model clauses, HIPAA, ISO, and we're taking a similar lead to GDPR compliance. So what this means is we're not simply waiting for the GDPR to go into effect and kind of following along. We're actively participating at the policy level with the policy writers to do a couple things. We try to shape policy to match our point of view, and we also work very hard to ensure that our products and services are acceptable to auditors. And we've learned this over the last 15 years that, taking a proactive step in this direction helps a lot. For example, when folks started to move the email workloads to the cloud, we saw significant resistance from organizations that had strict compliance requirements. And some of the policy writers and auditors were simply unaware of what we had to offer. So we did two things. We educated folks on what we did have to offer in the cloud and showed how we can improve security and compliance with cloud services, as well as we make changes in our platform when required. So when we see that, if there's a particular sovereign rule that it would put a customer in conflict with a particular compliance regulation, we attack it from two angles. We either try to change the regulation to what we believe makes better sense or is more in line with the spirit and intent of that regulation, or we change our service so that customers are in compliance. Number three, we offer the most comprehensive compliance capabilities from any major cloud service provider, and have the best baseline to build from. And this is something that if you pay attention to Ignite, not only do we have a great set of compliance features now, we're shipping a whole bunch of new stuff here shortly this quarter, and we will continue to ship compliance guidelines and improvements and product capabilities, all the way up to the beginning of the enforcement of the GDPR and beyond. We provide a single stack solution. Our stuff works pretty well together, and we have a very high speed of solution innovation. We're constantly improving the platform. We're listening to partners, listening to customers, actively taking steps to solve pain points where they exist.
Hey, David, can we just ask a couple of questions on the content you just presented?
Absolutely.
So one question was around the 72-hour reporting requirement. And so that's not just the IT department, right? That could be any employee that discovers something. Maybe they realize that their identity is stolen and they can trace that back to their organization. What about, we know the statistics about how long it actually takes to be able to discover a breach, and so are there fines if they don't find out for a certain number of days?
Yeah. So the way we understand the GDPR is that the organization has an obligation to report the data breach within 72 hours of their discovery. So if, let's say, we had the horror story of an embedded attacker, which has happened to folks, where there's been someone entrenched in the environment, having with access to email and other things for some period of time. The 72-hour notification is from the time the organization is first aware of the breach. So they basically have a very short time frame in which to investigate before they have to bring in a supervisory authority. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
So the key here is more of responsiveness. It's not so much, of course, there's a ton to be said about preventing the breach for sure. And certainly everyone, we expect everyone to take every precaution they can to do that. But there's also an assumption that, for a persistent attack, it's not a matter of if a breach will occur, it's more of a matter of when. And so if and when that happens to an organization, they have to they have a very short time frame to do an internal investigation. That's kind of the key thing. They can't take 6 months to figure out what happened and then report it. They have to report immediately, which could be, for folks that I've worked with that have had a public data breach, the data breach itself wasn't nearly as consequential as the sort of the news and the buzz and the bad press about the data breach.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for that. And then just one other little follow-up. So let's use Microsoft, a global company, as an example. So if we have, and we do, have European Union citizens working here in the U.S., are they protected?
Yes. So Microsoft, we won't differentiate our privacy position for different employees or customers. So the way we interpret the GDPR, it applies to all of our customers and our entire workforce. In fact, you can go today and there's a link. You can actually, as a consumer, you can request all the data that Microsoft has upon you, and they will produce it for you. Um, so so yes, they're protected, and certainly because the folks who are directly, or the GDPR directly applies to, are EU citizens. So even though we may apply the same protections and privacy controls for a U.S. citizen, the GDPR doesn't directly apply to them. I hope that makes sense. But it absolutely applies to someone that's an EU citizen or residing in the EU. They are the data subjects um, as defined by the GDPR.
All right, great. I'll let you move on, and hopefully we'll still have some more time for questions at the end. Thanks.
Oh yeah, I'll save some time for questions for sure. All right, so just here's kind of a graphic that shows the stuff we have in play for the GDPR. The black circles representing the major products, and the kind of the key compliance features that will help our customers prepare for the GDPR. So around Office, kind of the hero products or hero features are data loss prevention, threat intelligence, our audit log capability, and e-discovery. So the data loss prevention just helps stuff, personal data from leaking out unintentionally by monitoring the emails and OneDrive documents and stuff like that. And engineering is working on. So for those familiar with our DLP, can expect to see GDPR related DLP compliance types or sensitive item types in the near future. Engineering is working on them, and we're gonna ship that soon. As you know, we won't give dates on when things will ship, but expect to see some additional DLP coming out very soon. Threat intelligence really helps customers become proactive and respond to threats before they become a data breach. Our audit logs really help figure out who's doing what within the environment, which administrators are accessing data, which users are logging in from what IP address, et cetera. We have an extensive audit log capability, and the e-discovery we see is key to the GDPR discover scenario. So we see that the e-discovery search and the advanced e-discovery analytics as key enablers for discovering personal data and searching for data in unstructured formats. So for customers that have thousands or millions of documents, our e-discovery and advanced e-discovery capability can help them sift through that stuff very efficiently. On the EMS side, we have quite a bit of protection for devices with Intune, identity protection with the Active Directory controls, and a key enabler that's on this slide somewhere. It's the Azure Information Protection. We see AIP is instrumental in not only protecting personal data, but helping customers classify what is personal data and what data that they have is subject to the GDPR. Here's a quick slide showing we have made and we continue to make massive investments on our infrastructure, including specialty data centers. So sovereign data centers were needed, and gov data centers for customers that have particular compliance requirements, for the sovereign storage of certain data, for example, in Germany, and for government customers that need to have need to comply with certain regulations. We make massive investments to help support that, and we will continue to do so. We have quite a bit, just kind of there's a slide showing the types of customers we have on the platform now that are subject to, FedRAMP and some of the other, and ISO and other types of compliance regulations. All right. So we talk to partners. A lot of partners ask us, how I get started, and we see the GDPR as one more thing to comply with, or the customers might need to comply with. So the tasks involved with the GDPR are not fundamental. Many of the tasks are similar in nature to the types of things someone who needs to comply with ISO would need to comply with, or NIST, etc. And we've organized these tasks and capabilities around 4 lines, or 4 major categories. It's basically discover, manage, protect, and report. So in the context of the GDPR, customers need to be able to discover the personal data they have and figure out where it resides. They need to govern how that's used and accessed. They need to protect that personal data, both from internal threats as well as external vulnerabilities, data breaches, etc. And they need to report. They need to keep documentation. They need to be able to show how personal data was used or accessed in some cases. So on the Discover side, we have a number of solutions that can help. In Office, discovery is really, the kind of key enabler here is Office 365 e-discovery, which is it's our powerful content search engine, which will search all of Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and OneDrive for Business. On EMS, really, the cloud app security can really play a role here in helping identify where data is flowing through the organization, and where cloud app security can also help identify cross-border transfers. Some of the in-scope items for discovery are the way the GDPR reads. It's really anything that can be used to identify data subjects. That could be their name, email address, information about them, their appearance. And in some cases, it could even it could even be things like IP addresses and cookies. It doesn't mean, or at least I don't interpret this as meaning that every cookie necessarily can identify somebody, but it will cause folks to reevaluate some of the ways they track personal data and track customers and track behaviors. And some of the places we expect customers to have to sort through are certainly emails and documents, structured data and databases, removable media, backups, etc., metadata, log files, all those types of things. On the managed side, we expect customers to implement data governance policies and really sort through and define how they're storing data and how they're protecting data at rest, in process, and transit, etc. And another kind of a key activity we expect is data classification. Now, data classification isn't required per the letter of the GDPR as far as I understand it, but we see it as a key enabler. If folks have thousands or millions of documents that are unclassified, it's pretty hard. I would argue that it's pretty hard for them to really know what's in there or what's not in there. So we see data classification is a key enabler to compliance. Right now, we offer a number of data classification capabilities with Azure Information Protection, and we're shipping some new ones as well. So it's definitely, for example, we can classify data for customers automatically for data in the service today. So if a customer has Office 365, we can use Office 365 labels or Azure Information Protection, and we're extending this capability on premises. So it's one of the key things folks are asking us for today. Is what about all the stuff that exists on premises? And it's our position that the customers are better off. They're certainly, we have a better story in the cloud. It's our cloud capabilities can help them comply much better than they can do themselves in most cases. However, we've heard that many customers need help in order to move their data into Office 365, for example, they want to be able to classify it first and kind of have a better understanding of what they have, and we'll be shipping those capabilities, most soon.
So, David, you touched on it, but anything more you can kind of share in terms of um, the labels, right? So, if I go into, say, advanced data governance, and I go create some labels in Office 365, and I've got Azure Information Protection, and I've got labels there. Is there anything you can talk to in terms of Microsoft kind of working to unify those?
Absolutely. So we've heard loud and clear, and I've expressed it as clearly as I can as well, that this really needs to be one thing. Most customers don't want to have two different data classification engines. So we are actively working on unifying the label capability in Office 365 with what customers can do with Azure Information Protection. And as it stands today, that we've already picked up on if AIP deems something is sensitive, the Office 365 DLP engine will understand that as sensitive, and we can create a DLP rule around it. And then we're making additional investments to unify the Office 365 labels and Azure Information Protection labels.
All right, great, thanks. I'll look for some announcements coming up, maybe soon. Thanks.
Yeah, you should. I believe we have quite a bit on this being announced at Ignite. So stay tuned to Ignite, and then and for the folks going to Ignite, you probably get some opportunity to get hands on with some of the new stuff.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so protecting data, this is where I feel really good about our platform. I mean, I think we offer best of breed protection of customer data. So not only do we have state of the art physical data center protection, our network security, storage security, and compute security story is one of the best in the industry. And we have extensive identity management, access control, encryption, and risk mitigation. I mean, and one of the things that makes Microsoft unique is just simply the amount of signal we have. So I don't have the numbers, but we process something like 400 billion logins per day. So what that means is that we get a massive amount of signal, and we can we're in a position to understand threats as they emerge, and we extend this protection to customers. So, for example, when something new pops up, so a new ransomware or something like that, because of Microsoft's massive footprint, we're able to figure out what's going on very quickly. But in addition to that, we hire some of the best cyber security engineers on the planet, and they're actively playing this red team, blue team game where we analyze the code behind some these new attacks, and then actually our red team tries to use this attack internally and thwart the blue team. And so we're constantly not analyzing code, reusing it in a safe manner to try to poke holes in our own platform, and then fix that as quickly as possible. And the reason we do this is this helps us stay ahead of the curve, so that our platform is more protected. We're adapting to emerging threats as they occur. And then quite a bit of so there's quite a bit of stuff that Microsoft does for customers that are on our platform. But in addition to that, there's a number of things that the customer is responsible for doing themselves, and we're committed to helping in both areas. So not only are we committed to complying and doing everything we can to protect the customer and doing the right things of having state-of-the-art security and kind of doing what everyone expects us to do, we're also trying to get very proactive and helping customers do what they're supposed to do that we don't do for them. An example of this, is multi-factor authentication is probably one of the simplest, easiest things customers can do to protect themselves from a data breach. And we'll use tools like Office 365 Secure Score to inform customers, not only they need to do this, but kind of lead them step by step on how to do it. In addition to that, we've produced what we call IP kits for our partners to actually have complete service offerings kind of wrapped around things like Secure Store. So a partner can simply pick up, unzip the zip file, have ready to go presentations, agendas, instructions, delivery guides, etc., to kind of walk the customer through that last mile, so to speak, of security that they need to do to protect themselves. And also, and we also expect we expect the partners to be able to use protection or security and protection, or our security and protection story to sort of up level the customer from licensing standpoint. So if they simply have Exchange Online and they're not interested in other features, we found that most customers are interested in the security capabilities that come from, say, the E3 or the E5 license. And the last piece, the customers need to do is maintain detailed records and have a reporting capability around data security and the collection and processing of personal data. So, we've extended our data classification capabilities. We've also, put in quite a bit of work to, turn audit logs on by default, for example. So we have a number of things in the platform that will help with the requirement to keep records and report on the use of data, as well as provide reporting on breaches. And we don't necessarily believe this means that the only reporting requirement is to report of a breach. We actually expect customers to be able to defend against breaches and produce reports that show that they were not breached. Because we feel that there may be quite a few cases where an organization may be accused of a data breach data and simply needs to report that did not in fact happen. And here's a quick slide. I won't read this to you guys, but it kind of shows for the Discover, Manage, Protect, and Report pillars where our products land. So things like Security and Compliance Center, Data Loss Prevention, and Advanced Data Governance in Office 365 kind of span all four pillars. And then certain features like Content Search and e-discovery, kind of sit squarely in the Discover space, where AIP and IRM kind of sit squarely in the Manage and Protect spaces, respectively. Where we think this is interesting for partners and for Microsoft is IDC predicts that the GDPR is going to create a $3.5 billion market opportunity for security and storage vendors. And this is a big deal. We're expecting an acceleration of Office 365, EMS, and Windows sales due direct as a direct result of organizations trying to comply with the GDPR. And it's my opinion that an organization doesn't have to buy anything to comply. What I want to make clear what I try to make clear to customers and partners is that you don't have to buy stuff to be compliant, but a modern platform such as Office 365 or Microsoft 365 makes it much cheaper and easier to achieve the security and privacy goals of the GDPR. That's really where it's at. One could argue that they could simply, update their internal processes and documentation and keep using stuff they have, and that argument for many folks may be true, but it's pretty hard for customers to achieve the same level of security and adopt the same compliance controls that kind of come with our cloud platform. So that's really the kind of the message I want to tell folks is they can accelerate their compliance or make their compliance responsibility and make their job much easier by modernizing their endpoints and moving workloads and data to our cloud. So where we see this creating opportunities for partners we have GDPR has global impact. There's quite a bit of operational complexity in the privacy by design aspects. We definitely see partners becoming privacy consultants. And there's also a bit that we're not speaking to here, but I see there's kind of three categories of partners. One will provide legal services or advisory services, and there's parts of the GDPR that really do require the input from a definitive legal advisor. Right. So what this would revolve around establishing the legal basis by which the customer collects and processes data. And in many parts of the GDPR are a legal problem. And it's my position that, if a customer has a compliance problem, they'll probably end up in a court of law somewhere. And I do believe that partners who are not in a position to offer advisory services should defer to definitive legal guidance. What I mean, it could be the customer provides their own legal guidance. They may have their own attorneys on staff, or they may have their own counsel hired. Or this is an opportunity for, say, our infrastructure partners to partner up with someone that does provide the legal advisory services to kind of help establish, some part, or to help establish some parts of the GDPR story that are not directly related to technology. In addition, I believe this would build or put the customer in a much more defensible position than if they just try to kind of figure it out on their own. And the reason I bring this up is I don't want to see partners who are not providing definitive legal guidance to shortcut this step. I think it's really important. I think it could just simply be a matter of putting that responsibility back on the customer and say, hey, look, we really need some definitive guidance here. This is your area of responsibility, and here's how we can go about solving it. The second category of partner really are there infrastructure partners that are going to help configure things like AIP. They're going to help the customer migrate their data. And if this work is done, sort of in conjunction with definitive legal advice, I think we have a great story. And the third category of partner is that ISV partner who is providing capabilities that we're not providing in platform. For example, there's quite a bit of requirement around obtaining data subject consent and providing notice and consent tracking and all of that. We definitely see a big opportunity for ISV partners to create solutions that do just that. So there's significant fines. We don't want to lead with fear and uncertainty around the fines, but it would be irresponsible not to maintain awareness that the fines can be up to 4% of an organization's global revenue, or 20 million euros, whichever is greater. And that's a huge fine. That certainly undesirable, and for many customers it would hurt the business for sure. And we definitely see a shortfall of privacy professionals. Just the need for 75,000 DPOs coming up here in 6 months. There's simply not enough people with the acceptable credentials looking for work that'll be able to fill those. So we see significant opportunity for the partners in providing DPO as a service. And also, we see this opportunity for partners to partner with other partners, right? So we have our security vendors will often benefit from working with compliance professionals. Even though, I like to say that you can have security without compliance, you cannot have compliance without security, right? If you don't have a good security posture, or an organization does not have a good security posture, they're by definition out of compliance. But the same is not true the other way around. Some organizations may not be required to comply with the GDPR or something, but security is still a need for them. We have the system integrated, and as well, what I don't have on the slide, but I believe is an important piece of the picture, is definitive legal guidance. So some of our partners are already doing this. The typical, Big Four and folks like that. We're also seeing some of our system integrators are actually hiring attorneys to establish a GDPR practice. And I think that's key. I wouldn't want our infrastructure folks, system architects like me, trying to pretending to be lawyers. But similar to the work we did solving business continuity problems and disaster recovery problems and other compliance issues, just working under the advice of someone who can provide definitive legal advice goes a long way. And our last slide here, just we're building our partner readiness. We're right here in Q4 we're right here in this category. And this slide's a little bit out of date. We expected to have feature to policy mapping done already. That is coming soon. So we are producing guidance that'll go article by article through the GDPR and show not only which products can help, but cover to the best of our ability create solution scenarios on and guidance, kind of the how to comply with certain parts of the GDPR where Microsoft technology can help. And then in really starting in between November of this year and May, we're going to ramp up activity with partners, and we're going to try to accelerate the partner play as much as possible to help to help enable our partners address the GDPR compliance problem. All right. So next steps for you folks. Number one, if you don't know already, if you need to be GDPR compliant, you need to figure that out soon. Most of the attorneys I've talked to have said, if folks haven't started their GDPR compliance journey a year ago, they're too late. We want our partners to reassure our customers that the Microsoft Cloud will be compliant with the GDPR on or before May 25th of 2018. And in addition, we'll share our knowledge, on our journey to become compliant as a data controller. We'll share the tools and the knowledge to the extent possible with our customers. Certainly want everyone to learn more about the GDPR and Microsoft security offerings. I've got a slide with a link to all that. And then what we really want to see is our partners identifying their go-to-market strategy using the Microsoft Cloud. We're working with our partner community to get offers in market, and Michael can speak more to this on our build with and sell with motions. And we do want our partners piloting service and offerings now, if you're not doing so already. So where to find more information is Microsoft.com/GDPR, and that page will lead you to all the other stuff we have. We do have some great demos on using various Microsoft technology to comply with some key aspects of the GDPR, as well as some technical demos that you folks can consume right now. If you have system architects that want to get started with some of the technology, we have some great demos we just did that kind of walk through the backstory of GDPR, as well as some of the technical tasks like implementing AIP labels and encryption and stuff to help comply. All right, so that's all we have for the deck. I'd like to open it up for questions. Anybody has anything they'd like to ask or talk about?
Yeah, thanks, David. So anybody has any questions, we got a couple queued up, but feel free to go ahead and post those, and we'll get those answered. So really appreciate the content. We've got some nice little feedback commentary throughout the call, so it's being well received. So thank you for that. Yeah, I did post, and you can probably find it there from the link that David had put up, but I posted in the messages window the aka.ms/GDPR partners, and that has a bunch of resources that are specific to partners, and in there you see the GDPR demos that David just mentioned. We went through these the other day. I took a look at it. There's a lot of rich stuff in there, and there are demos that kind of go through the entire story. I mean videos that go through the entire story, and then you can download those assets. The only challenge is Microsoft Office Demos environment is temporarily not provisioning quick tenants, but we hope to have that resolved soon. So yeah, a couple of questions. one of them was around in enforcement. Who is responsible for enforcement of these requirements?
But it's each of the EU member countries. So while the GDPR is, applies to all the EU, well, let me first preface this. I'm not a lawyer, and a lot of these types of questions are probably best answered by a privacy attorney. But how it was explained to me by a privacy attorney is that the GDPR does apply to the entire European Union, but each member country is responsible for adopting the GDPR themselves, and they become the supervisory authority. So there's not, as far as I understand it, there's not a single authority that covers all of the EU. It's each country still has the authority within their country.
Wow. So a question from Raymond says there's no definition on how often they can fine daily if they're not in compliance. So do you know anything about that in terms of how often they can fine and how that happens?
I don't know, and my understanding or what I expect is that once enforcement begins, we're probably going to see some fines issued, and then I think there's going to be a process by which that is litigated. So my understanding is quite a bit of the GDPR, it exists or the GDPR exists in statute today, and it will exist in law once it's in effect, and the law changes as things are litigated. So what I mean by this is I think when the first company or the first group of companies gets fined, they're probably going to appeal that to some degree, and we'll probably see some refinement in all of this and start knowing what to expect after May. I don't believe the fine, the huge fine they're talking about is meant to be a daily fine. And I think there's flexibility in how the supervisory authority is allowed to apply the fine. And there's a clear indication that for companies who are, found to be out of compliance but can show an attempt to comply or show good faith, the fines are supposed to be less. I know that much. That's in the statute now.
Hmm.
So soft answer there, but that's really, that's best answered by an attorney or someone who's qualified to interpret the law.
Absolutely. And then one other question from Ryan is there any guidance out there for clarifying data residency requirements?
No. Well, I shouldn't say is there any guidance out there. I don't have good guidance on data residency requirements. This is another area where every country has the authority to establish their own sovereignty or residency requirements, and what we do from Microsoft's perspective, we do our best to make sure that we can influence policies so that, say, things like Office 365, where data can exist in different countries, is acceptable, or we respond in the service. So in the case of Germany has some fairly strict requirements here, we'll respond by adapting the service to allow for data to be stored, say, in a data center that's acceptable. But that's it's a pretty vague answer because I don't have any specific guidance on that.
All right, that's just fine. All right, well, we're just about at the top of the hour, and I want to thank you again for taking the time with our partner community. Really appreciate this very timely content, and David just wants to make a couple of changes to that deck, and then we will post that up to the Yammer group. And you can always revisit the recording, usually a few hours after, to come back and be able to view this recording again if you want to be able to share that. And we also post it to our YouTube playlist. So thank you everybody for joining today. Really appreciate it. And David, thanks again.
And Michael, before we close, I wanted to point out one asset that I'd like to have partners take a look at. If you're not already of servicetrust.microsoft.com, when it comes to the questions like the guidance we do have, this is where to find it. So we have an amazing collection of artifacts that show not only how Microsoft is compliant with various aspects, but we have quite a bit of documents on things like customer controls. So I want to just show this very briefly. There's a ton of amazing information in here, including things like compliance companions and cloud risk assessment guides that partners can use today to help customers comply. And GDPR is not in here, but if you want to get a sense of what to expect, take a look at something like our ISO Office 365 Control Companion. And if you're not familiar with this resource, this is definitely a place for compliance professionals to go and take a look and see what we have out here. And if we do have per country like residency guidelines, it would be here. And this is different from the Trust Center and Office 365. That's why I want to bring it up. I found that not all partners are aware of this.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. servicetrust.microsoft.com.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you again, and have a great rest of your morning or afternoon, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.